On the line with us is Dan Mitchell, Ph.D., Dr. Dan Mitchell, an economist and senior fellow at the Cato Institute, and also serves on the editorial board of the Cayman Financial Review. Cato.org, of course, is the website. Do I have that right, Dr. Mitchell?
That's all correct.
Okay, welcome to the program. My understanding is that we are the goal of our conversation is to discuss a we society like the United States had arguably from the 1930s until the 1980s versus a me society, greed is good, like we had under Reaganism from 1980 to today, and which might be better. Do I have that right?
Well, I've never actually agreed with that classification because I think all through human history, there's always been an element of greed. And the question is that greed channeled productively or is it channeled unproductively? And if you have cronyism, if you have government with a lot of power over the economy, then greed gets channeled unproductively. Whereas if you have a genuine market economy, then if someone really wants to become rich, they can only become rich by serving the needs of their fellow man. And I like that.
So then you're absolutely opposed to the Koch brothers putting $900 billion behind Scott Walker.
I don't quite think they're putting $900 billion behind Scott Walker. But I'm a firm believer that we have a First Amendment protecting participation in the political process. And if the Koch brothers decide to pick Scott Walker or Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or, for that matter, Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton, that's their right.
How is that? That is completely inconsistent with what you just said a moment ago. You said you were opposed to crony capitalism, where the capitalists reach out, I'm paraphrasing, reach out for control over government so that the government is supporting the capitalists and vice versa. And yet that's exactly what we're describing when we talk about, billionaires buying politicians. Isn't it? How is it not?
The real issue is what are they trying to achieve? Now, the Koch brothers, at least as far as I understand it, they want to get rid of the Export-Import Bank. They want to get rid of energy subsidies, some of which benefit their own companies. So they're looking to back politicians who will actually reduce the power of government, which means that the Koch industries and the various companies that are controlled by the Kochs would have to earn money by pleasing consumers rather than buying politicians.
Dan, you and I both know it's not that simple. One of the major campaigns that not just and I don't want to personalize this to the Koch brothers, although the Cato Institute started out as the Charles Koch Foundation. But in fact, let's take the Koch brothers out of the equation. ExxonMobil has been funding for decades climate denial. They've known since the 1970s that climate change was happening and that it was happening as a result of their products. And they are buying scientists, the same scientists who were denying that tobacco causes cancer, the Fred Singers of the world. They're getting these guys out there and saying, "Oh, there's no such thing here." How is that? And look at the tax breaks. I mean, you've got a $5 trillion in government support for the fossil fuel industry worldwide annually. How is that? And this is stuff that is supported by these very wealthy people in the United States. And you're calling it a First Amendment right, and yet you're decrying crony capitalism. I don't get it.
I support anybody's right to participate in the political process. I might then disagree with their goals for trying to help politicians. If you're giving money to a politician because you want that politician to take money from person A to give it to you, I think that's bad. If you're giving money to a politician because you simply want to be left alone, I think that's admirable.
How is ExxonMobil making $40 billion in profits and paying no income taxes because they were able to hire lobbyists to drill 1 million holes in the tax code? How is that not crony capitalism?
The tax code is 75,000 pages of special interest loopholes. I'm a flat tax guy, so I'm completely with you that the tax code is horribly corrupt and benefits the special interest.
And all of those loopholes are there because some corporation or some billionaire or the Walton family or whatever, their big thing, of course, the inheritance tax, has been able to put money into the political process and get what they want. The average working person can't put money into the political process and get what they want. I mean, look at the study that came out of Princeton just a few months ago, that the desires of the top 1% are more than 56% likely to be made into legislation, whereas the desires of the bottom 90%, the probability of their becoming legislation is equal to random noise. This is not a democracy. It's an oligarchy, as Jimmy Carter called it on this program last week.
Well, that could very well be the case, that rich people have more influence, but then
why is that a good thing?
But what are the rich people looking for? 8 out of the 10
more money.
Congressional districts in the country vote left, and they're voting for.
Then why do Republicans control the House and the Senate?
Well, because not the entire country isn't rich people on the coast, which tend to vote Democrat. So you do have this very strange thing where you have some very rich people voting very hardcore left, and then you have middle America voting more toward the right. And I'm more on the side of middle America. I want government out of the economy. I want genuine markets to determine how resources get allocated, not whether politicians have their fingers on the scale.
Dan, my take on this is that the Republican Party and increasingly parts of the Democratic Party, I'd say at least the Blue Dog Caucus, the Republican Party is basically made up of 3 groups. You've got the billionaires who are funding everything and the transnational corporations. You've got the well-paid shills for them or spokespeople for them. And you've got the dupes, the suckers. And you're calling them middle Americans. I'm calling them suckers. How is it to the benefit of anybody to vote for a politician whose principal agenda is to deregulate the fossil fuel industry so that more poison gets pumped into our air, deregulate the banks so we're more likely to have an economic crash, and cut taxes on the Walton family and the Kochs, which is what Sam Brownback did?
If my choice as a middle American is becoming more like Greece or trying not to become like Greece, then I think it's in my best interest not to become like Greece.
Well, but Republicans are, if you wanted to use the Greece analogy is Louisiana. Louisiana is sucking as much roughly as much federal money out of the federal government as Greece was 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, Louisiana is a net drain. They consume federal resources, unlike California, which provides a surplus of federal resources. This is largely true across the red states. So the Republican states, by and large, are Greece, and the Republican politicians by saying, oh no, we can't expand Medicaid here. We can't, and we got to cut taxes on the billionaires like Sam Brownback did in Kansas and Scott Walker did in Wisconsin. And all of a sudden their states are hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in debt. Oh, well, the solution to that is to cut money for education. Really? How does that help the middle Americans?
If you want to keep making government bigger and keep making different states, or for that matter, the federal government more like Greece, that doesn't end well. If I look at the states, the 50 states, and yes, there are little anomalies on each side, but by and large, the states that are in the biggest trouble are the ones that follow the blue model of higher taxes and bigger government.
You mean like California?
I guarantee you,
which has a surplus right now.
California and Illinois will go bankrupt before Louisiana does.
California has a surplus right now. Jerry Brown raised taxes, and they have a surplus.
It's which one will go bankrupt first, and I'm more than happy.
Well, Louisiana, if Louisiana was held to the same rules, and you know this, you're an economist. Come on, Dan. If Louisiana was held to the exact same rules as Greece, which is as a state, you can't have any more federal money than anybody else has, they would be bankrupt right now. And so would Mississippi, and so would Alabama, and so would Texas.
I do agree with you fully that we shouldn't be having subsidies from the federal government to the states. We should have genuine decentralization and federalism. Let states be responsible for raising and spending their own money and make Washington a much smaller part of our economy.
So then what do you do for the kids who are born in poor states like West Virginia or Louisiana or Alabama and there's no money for their schools? What do you do?
Oh, you could do school choice and get much better education for less money.
I see. Bring in for-profit private schools.
It works in Sweden.
Okay. You have the last word. Dan Mitchell, Dr. Dan Mitchell, Senior Fellow with the Cato Institute, the website cato.org. Thanks, Dan, for dropping by today.
Thanks, Tom.
Good talking with you.